My name is Donna Patterson. I'm 39 years old, and this is the story of how my husband stole from our daughter, shattered the life I thought I had, and how, thanks to the unlikeliest person, I got it all back. It was a Tuesday morning, the kind of morning where the sun hasn't yet decided if it wants to warm the world or hide behind clouds. I was still in my pajamas, hair tied back in a lazy knot, coffee cooling on the nightstand. That's when I walked into our bedroom and saw Mark, my husband of 22 years, shoving shirts into a suitcase like the house was on fire. "What are you doing?" My voice came out shaky, not because I thought he was leaving, but because I already knew. Somewhere deep down I'd always known. He didn't look at me, just kept packing with the mechanical precision of a man who'd already practiced this in his head. "Mark, stop." I grabbed his arm. He shrugged me off like I was a stranger who had no right to touch him. "Talk to me," I pleaded. "What's happening?" Finally he met my eyes, and in that split second I saw nothing. No guilt, no sadness, no regret, just cold, clear determination. "I'm leaving, Donna. Today." It hit me like a punch to the chest. Yesterday we'd sat together over dinner, talking about Emma, our 12-year-old daughter, and her future college plans. Yesterday he'd kissed my forehead before bed. Yesterday I was a wife. And today, I was whatever this made me. Is there someone else? The question fell out before I could stop it. He froze for a fraction of a second, a shirt halfway into his bag. A flicker, guilt? Fear? Crossed his face, then vanished. This isn't about anyone else. I need to breathe again. But I knew. I'd known for months. Buried it under a mountain of excuses. The late nights. The phone always face down. The work trips that didn't line up with his office calendar. "Where will you go?" My voice sounded small. "I'll figure it out. But I need you to transfer my half of the savings to my personal account today." That's when the real panic hit. Not just losing him, but losing everything. I bolted downstairs, heart pounding, and logged into our bank account. My fingers shook so badly I could barely type. The screen loaded and my stomach turned to ice. Our checking account, $247.83. Our savings, zero. Emma's college fund, the account we'd been building for 12 years, $75,000 gone. No, it came out as a whisper, then again louder. No. No, no, no. I refreshed the page. The numbers didn't change. The transaction history told the story in cold, black text. 3 days ago, while I was at my book club, Mark had transferred it all. Not just our joint savings. Not just his half. Every penny, including Emma's future. The sound of footsteps on the stairs made me spin around. Mark came down, suitcase in hand, walking past me like I was a piece of furniture. "That's it?" I asked. My voice trembled, but it was louder than I thought it could be. 22 years and you just walk away? He stopped at the door, hand on the knob. "I left you a voicemail explaining everything." "I don't want a voicemail." My voice cracked. "Look at your daughter and explain why you're abandoning her." Emma appeared in the doorway to the kitchen, still in her school uniform. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She just stared at him, eyes sharp, unreadable. "You'll understand when you're older," he told her. The door closed behind him with a quiet click that was somehow louder than any slam. "Is he coming back?" she asked. I wanted to lie. To say, yes, of course. But the truth sat heavy on my tongue. "I don't think so, baby." She nodded slowly, processing it like she processed everything with methodical care. "Did he take our money?" My throat closed. I could only nod. Emma picked up her cereal bowl, rinsed it, and put it away. Then she turned to me, expression unreadable. "Mom," she said, "don't worry. I handled it." I stood there, staring at the space where the door had been, listening for footsteps that would not return. The kitchen sounded too alive for a house that had just been emptied. Refrigerator humming, coffee maker clicking, the bird that nested in the oak by our window chattering like nothing in the world had changed. My hand was still on the back of the chair I'd grabbed when my knees buckled. Emma's bowl was drying on the rack, upside down like a little white dome. She watched me with those dark, intelligent eyes that looked so much like his, and nothing like him at all. "Handled what?" I asked because I couldn't think of anything else to say. She slipped her backpack onto one shoulder and checked the clock. If I don't leave now, I'll miss my bus. We'll talk after school. Then she kissed my cheek in that automatic way children do when their routines are muscle memory, and walked out the front door. When it clicked closed, something left my body. I realized it was the last bit of denial, the childish hope that this was a tantrum, not a departure. I went back to the computer and stared at the bank screen. Like if I looked long enough, the numbers would rearrange themselves back into the life I recognized. Checking. $247.83. Savings, $0. College fund, $0. The cursor blinked in the search field of the transaction history, patient as a pulse. I called the bank again. I said my husband had taken money, our money, my daughter's money, the money we told ourselves was the promise of choices, and that he'd done it while I was at a book club where we talked about a novel I cannot remember. The woman on the phone, whose name sounded like it could be carved into a brass desk plaque, explained things to me in a voice meant to soothe. Mrs. Patterson, the 529 plan lists Mark Patterson as the account owner. You and your daughter are designated as successor owner and beneficiary respectively, but the owner has control over distributions. How can he just take it? I asked, swallowing hard against the taste that rose in the back of my throat. It's for Emma. It's her future. There are tax implications and penalties if funds aren't used for qualified expenses, she said, gentle as a bandage. But withdrawals are allowed at the owner's discretion. We can place alerts on accounts moving forward, and I recommend you contact law enforcement if you suspect identity misuse. It wasn't identity misuse when a man used his own name to empty an account he owned. It was worse. It was choosing to burn your house down because you didn't like the paint. I drove to the branch because the words on the phone made no purchase in my brain. Inside the bank, the air felt cold and clean and perfumed with coffee from a little machine near the door. There was a vase of tulips on a high counter, and a man in a suit holding a folder at a 45-degree angle, like all he did all day was hold his life like this. The manager, Ms. Nguyen, brought me into a glass-walled office and closed the door without locking it, because locking would mean danger and danger is bad for business. I want to file a complaint, I said. He took our daughter's college fund. Ms. Nguyen folded her hands. I can document your concerns and create a report. If there are fraudulent applications or forged signatures, that's a different process. For the 529, however, I need to be transparent. As the owner, he had the legal authority. Do you have children? I asked her, hating myself for it the second it left my mouth. She held my gaze. One son, she said. He is 3. Imagine someone taking his future and calling it paperwork, I said softly. She didn't look away. I'm so sorry. I signed forms I didn't understand to monitor what was left. When I walked out, the sun had fully committed to the day. It was bright enough that I had to stand for a moment with my eyes closed, pretending the red glow behind my eyelids was some kind of protection. In the parking lot, a man in a reflective vest collected shopping carts like stray thoughts. At home, I played the voicemail Mark said he'd left me. It was 2 minutes and 11 seconds of a language I recognized but did not understand. He said he needed space. He said he felt suffocated. He said he'd become a stranger in his own house, which was funny considering he was the one who looked at me like I was furniture. He did not mention Emma by name. He said the kid once and corrected himself so quickly that the sound of the D barely formed. He did not say love. He did not say sorry. I called him back so many times that the voicemail box filled, then emptied as he deleted my messages, then filled again. I left him a text with nothing but a question mark, because sometimes there are no words left and you just want the other person to be forced to stare at a punctuation mark and feel its shape. He didn't respond. At 2:56 p.m., the bus exhaled at the corner and a stream of children spilled out, a river of backpacks and chatter and neon shoelaces. Emma emerged in the middle, moving with the small self-contained focus of a person who knows where she's going. She waved at Mrs. Henderson, the librarian who sometimes helped with the bus duty, and came toward me. Hey Mom, she said lightly, like she hadn't told me she'd handled it. She washed her hands, pulled an apple from the bowl, and retrieved a paring knife with the exact, efficient motion of a surgeon. She cut the apple into 8 perfect segments, 8-4, and slid the plate toward me with the other 4. I ate them even though my stomach felt like glass. Homework. I asked because normalcy is an incantation we say to trick the gods into leaving us alone. She nodded. History and math. We're doing the Industrial Revolution. Did you know the first public railway in the United States opened in 1826? Who told you to be that calm? I asked before I could stop myself. Slipped out raw and ugly. She met my eyes. You did, she said, and went upstairs. I called my sister Janet because sisters exist for the moment you need to hold on to something that looks like the shape of yourself. She answered on the second ring and said my name the way a person says it when they know your whole childhood. I don't know how to be angry and not fall apart, I confessed. I am trying to be present for Emma, and my bones are water. You're allowed to be both, Janet said. When Dad left, remember? You cried every day in the bathtub. I broke Mom's blue vase and told everyone it fell. I remember, I whispered. I also remember we kept going to school and bringing home library books. Like if we returned them on time, the library would give us back our life. Janet breathed into the phone in a way that told me she was walking around her kitchen, touching things with her free hand, grounding herself. Do you want me to come over tonight? No, I said, and surprised myself by meaning it. If you come, I'll cry the kind of cry that never ends. I need to get through today without drowning. After dinner, which was grilled cheese because my body could only execute tasks I learned when I was 9, I carried a tray to Emma's room. The door was cracked open. The sound of typing drifted down the hallway, quick and even, with the rhythm of a person solving something. For a moment I thought she was playing a game. Then I thought about how she had looked at me that morning when she said, I handled it. And I knew it wasn't a game. Come in, she called. She had angled her laptop slightly away from the door, the way a person does when they don't want you to feel like you're sneaking. Her desk looked like the photographs they put in furniture catalogs to show you how a desk should behave. Notebooks squared to edges, pens in a jar, a stapler aligned like a small soldier. There was a stack of printed pages under her science textbook, neat enough to be invisible until you looked for them. Grilled cheese your way, I said, placing the tray down. Thanks. She didn't look up. She moved her hands across the keys in clean, confident strokes. I recognized those hands as mine. The shape of the knuckles, the short nails she kept because she hated the way hangnails felt against cotton. The sound of her typing made something primitive in me sit up and listen. What are you working on? History, she said. Do you need help? I'm good. I should have left then. Taken my adult body back down the hall, and given my child the space she was telling me she needed. Instead, the part of me that had been dissolved by the bank and the voicemail reached for something solid. My eyes fell to the edge of paper peeking from under the textbook, white with the faint shadow of a header at the top like you see on an email printout. I read the first line without meaning to. It had a hotel name I knew, because years ago we had gone there for our 10th anniversary and danced in a ballroom where the chandeliers looked like 1,000 tiny comets. Emma, I said, and my voice was careful the way you are careful when you pick up a glass you know is cracked. What is that? She followed my gaze, then closed the laptop with 2 fingers. She slid the science book off the paper with a steady hand and lifted the page. The cool thing she did next scared me more than anything else could have. She did not shove it at me like a child caught cheating might do in a bid to earn points through transparency. She did not hide it either. She just held it at her side, like she'd been waiting to be asked. Mom, she said without drama, do you trust me? You're 12, I answered before my heart could answer the other thing. You shouldn't need me to trust you with whatever this is. She tilted her head, weighing my words. I agree, but that's where we are. Do you trust me right now? I looked at her, at the trick light played on the tiny scar on her chin from the time she fell off her bike at 7, at the way her hairline dipped in a soft widow's peak like my grandmother's, at the sharpness in her gaze that did not belong to any ancestor I wanted credit for. I thought about the bank manager's hands folded on the table, about the tulips on their long green stems, about the voicemail like a man reading a script he wrote to make his crimes anthropological rather than personal. I thought about the $247.83 in checking, its sense begging for meaning. Yes, I said, and I meant it. I do. Then let me finish this, she said gently. I'll show you after. Is this about your father? It's about us, she said. And about not letting anyone treat us like we don't know where the wires go. The phrasing made my chest ache with a grief so new it still smelled like the box it came in. I left her room and leaned my head against the wall in the hallway. The drywall was cool and smooth, like a sturdy, unfeeling shoulder. Downstairs, the house ticked as it settled. The bird in the oak had gone quiet for the night. The sky beyond the window was the color of a bruise that would fade in a week, but still be sore if you pressed it. I didn't sleep so much as misplaced time. I woke at 3:07 a.m. and checked the bank accounts again, as if a digital miracle would hand us back what had been stolen. When I stood in the dark kitchen with my hands on the counter, the smallest noise carried like a confession. In the silent house, the soft, steady tapping from down the hall returned. It was not frantic, not fearful. It was the sound of a plan writing itself into existence one keystroke at a time. In the morning, Emma emerged at 7:15 with her backpack zipped and her lunch packed herself. She kissed my cheek and said, "Have a good day, Mom," in the same voice she'd used yesterday and the day before that and the day before our life divided into before and after. I watched her walk to the bus stop, spine straight, braid swinging. A gust of wind lifted the hem of her skirt and laid it gently back down. I called the pediatrician and asked for a referral because that's what you do when you're a mother and the ground under your kid looks like it might become a fault line. Dr. Martinez's receptionist booked us with a psychologist named Dr. Reeves for the following week. I wrote the appointment time on a sticky note and attached it to the fridge with the magnet shaped like a lighthouse we bought when Emma was 5 and insisted every lighthouse had a name. At lunch, my coworker at the library whispered that I looked luminous in a kind of tragic way, which is a thing only librarians can say without sounding like a villain. I shelved returns in the 300s and tried not to think about the way Mark had moved around our house in his last hour, like an actor hitting marks in a play about a man who had to sleep in a bed he'd made for strangers. A mother with a toddler on her hip asked where the books about big feelings lived, and I directed her to the parenting shelf with a hand that didn't shake. The toddler reached for a board book about trucks and chewed the corner. The mother apologized and I said the thing librarians say because it's true, books are for using. When I came home, Emma was already at the table, a pencil tucked behind her ear like she'd been born with it. There was a spiral notebook on the surface, closed, and the laptop beside it, electricity sleeping behind the black screen. She looked up and met my eyes with a calmness that wasn't performative. It was a thing she had chosen and put on like a coat. "I'll show you now," she said. "If you're ready." I sat across from her, palms flat on the table. "I'm ready." She opened the notebook first. The pages were dense with tidy handwriting. Dates, names, questions, arrows connecting boxes like a map of a country that did not exist on any globe but ours. She slid the printed email thread toward me, and I saw what I had suspected and not allowed myself to articulate. The subject lines had dates from weeks before he left. Hotel confirmations. Calendar blocks labeled client dinner, that were dinner only in the nutritional sense. I did not cry. I did not gasp. I watched the evidence of my life reassemble itself into the shape it had always been while I stared at it from the wrong angle. "Mom," she said softly, and in her voice I heard neither triumph nor apology, only care. "I need you to know I didn't go looking for this. It was there. He left it everywhere because he thought we wouldn't notice." "How long have you known?" I asked. "Long enough," she said. "Long enough for what?" She closed the notebook, and the sound of the cardboard covers meeting had the weight of a door. "Long enough," she repeated, "to make sure he can't do it again." I didn't answer her right away. The kitchen felt smaller, like the air had been thickened with some invisible syrup. I kept my palms flat on the table because if I curled my fingers into fists, I wasn't sure I could uncurl them again. The printed pages in front of me blurred until the words became meaningless shapes, like those vision tests where the doctor asks if this is better or that. Except neither choice gave me clarity. Emma watched me, head tilted slightly, eyes scanning my face as if she were measuring my capacity for bad news in real time. "Mom," she said finally, the softness in her voice cutting through my paralysis, "you should see the rest." I swallowed hard. "The rest of what?" She reached for her laptop, flipping it open with that same deliberate care she used for everything. The screen lit up in a muted glow, revealing a folder named Science Fair Project. I almost laughed, half because it was so absurd and half because it was exactly the kind of disguise I should have known my daughter would think of. She clicked, and the folder opened into a series of subfolders with names that were both ordinary and ominous. Financial records, communication logs, travel, identity theft evidence. Each one sat there on the screen like a sealed box I already knew was filled with knives. Emma clicked on financial records. My husband's name, Mark Patterson, appeared on dozens of PDF icons. She opened one. It was a bank statement, but not from any account I recognized. The numbers made my throat tighten. $75,000, Emma's college fund, listed as a deposit 3 days before his transfer from our accounts. It was sitting there alongside another transaction for $200,000 from a loan I'd never heard of. The loan was in my name. I stared at the screen. Emma, this says that Dad used your employment history and my social security number to apply for a mortgage in Florida. She finished for me, her voice steady as if she were reading the weather report. The $75,000 wasn't the end game, Mom. It was the down payment. The rest they planned to pay with the loan. You and I would have been legally responsible when they defaulted. I leaned back in my chair. They? Dad and Rebecca Sterling, Emma said. She didn't flinch when she said the name. His girlfriend. I closed my eyes, but that only made the images sharper. Mark in a hotel room with someone whose name I'd never known until now, signing documents with my identity like it was just a pen he borrowed. How do you know all this? Emma glanced at me briefly, then back at her screen. Because Dad's bad at passwords. Same one for everything. He doesn't clear his browser history. And he leaves his devices unlocked if he thinks he'll only be gone for a minute. I started noticing patterns. One night I saw him using a second phone he thought was hidden. That's where I started. Started what? Her lips curved. Not into a smile, but into something more precise like a closing bracket. Collecting evidence. I wanted to tell her it wasn't her job. That she was 12 years old and the weight of this should not rest on her narrow shoulders. But another part of me, the part still reeling from the bank, the voicemail, the legal dead ends, knew I hadn't been able to protect her. She clicked on communication logs. Screenshots filled the screen, text conversations between Mark and Rebecca, emails about the Sarah situation, my name, stripped of intimacy, photos of property listings in Florida. My hands tightened around the edge of the table when I saw an email from Rebecca to Mark. Once we're settled, she can't touch us. The debt will be in her name and the girls. She'll be too broke to chase anything. Emma's voice was even when she said, that's why I couldn't just sit and wait. I had to make sure there was no settling for them to do. What did you do, Emma? She opened identity theft evidence. This folder was a catalog of fraud, loan applications, fake investment portfolios, falsified tax records. There were also documents I didn't recognize, complaints filed with credit bureaus, fraud alerts to the IRS, reports to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Emma scrolled. First, I gathered everything. Screenshots, files, call recordings. Then I locked down every account with our names on it and froze our credit. That blocked the mortgage in Florida before it could go through. Then, she hesitated only long enough for me to catch the flicker in her eyes. I reported Rebecca's other crimes. Other crimes. Emma clicked a different folder labeled Rebecca Sterling, client fraud. Inside were bank transfer records showing large sums moving from client accounts into Rebecca's personal account, false invoices, and emails arranging to cover her tracks. She's been stealing from her clients for years, Mom. Old people. Retirees. I couldn't just ignore that. I was gripping the table so hard my fingers hurt. You got into her work accounts? Her password was Sterling 2011, Emma said, almost incredulous. Her last name and the year she graduated college. It was on her LinkedIn. That's like leaving your front door open with a sign that says, "Please rob me." She scrolled again. I sent the evidence to her boss, her clients, and the state board. She got suspended yesterday. The words were too big to process all at once. My daughter, 12 years old, had dismantled 2 adults' lives in less than 3 weeks. Emma. My voice cracked. This is dangerous. She finally looked at me, her eyes clear, sharp, and older than they should have been. More dangerous than letting them ruin us? No, Mom. I didn't just protect the money. I made sure they can't do this to anyone else. I sat back, feeling the strange collision of fear and awe. The daughter I tucked in at night had just told me she was orchestrating something that sounded like a federal investigation, and she said it like it was homework. What happens now? I asked quietly. Emma's expression didn't change. Now we wait. Rebecca's scrambling, Dad's next. And when people panic, they make mistakes. I'll see those mistakes before they see me. I should have argued. Should have told her to stop. But part of me, the part that had been humiliated, blindsided, and robbed, wanted to see exactly what my daughter saw coming. That night, long after she'd gone to bed, I lay awake listening. At 11:42 p.m., I heard it. The steady, deliberate clicking of keys. Not frantic. Not playful. The sound of a plan still unfolding. And for the first time in days, I didn't feel powerless. The phone rang 2 days later at 2:15 in the afternoon. I was in the kitchen, rinsing lunch dishes when Mark's name flashed across the screen. The sight of it made my stomach twist so violently that I nearly dropped the plate I was holding. It had been over a week since he walked out, and I'd heard nothing but his scripted voicemail. Hello. My voice came out smaller than I wanted. Donna, something's happening. Something really bad. His tone was urgent, tight with a kind of panic I'd never heard from him before. I wiped my hands on a dish towel, glancing toward the dining table where Emma sat with her school laptop open. She looked up at me the second she heard his name through my voice. What kind of bad? I asked. My bank accounts are frozen. All of them. They said there's some sort of federal review. And, his breath hitched. Rebecca got fired yesterday. Security escorted her out. They're saying she was stealing from clients. I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from reacting. Across the table, Emma's eyes didn't leave mine. She took a slow sip of water, then set the glass down with precision, as if timing herself to his words. I don't see how that has anything to do with me, I said evenly. It's too much of a coincidence. First she gets hit with this embezzlement claim, and now my finances are under investigation. Someone is targeting us. And they know exactly what they're doing. I glanced at Emma again. Without breaking eye contact, she reached over and opened her personal laptop. Lines of code, windows, and folders appeared in quick succession. Maybe it's someone from her work? I suggested, forcing my tone into something almost casual. Mark hesitated. She thinks it might be a coworker, or someone she rejected. But, he stopped abruptly. Wait, what was that sound? What sound? I asked. There was a beep, like someone just opened my email. I can see it on my screen right now. Emails are opening and closing by themselves. Across from me, Emma's fingers danced across the keyboard with the fluidity of a concert pianist. The soft chime of a new window opening on her screen matched the sound he'd just described. Mark, I said. Maybe you should hang up and call your bank. No, Donna, listen. This is serious. Someone's in my accounts right now. My social media's being accessed. Oh my God, they're posting things. Financial documents. Private messages between me and Rebecca. Emma minimized one window and opened another. Even from where I sat, I could tell she was orchestrating this entire storm in real time. Mark, if the information's true, it's not exactly defamation, I said. That's what the police told me. He snapped, desperation rising in his voice. If the documents are real, they call it whistleblowing, not harassment. But how would anyone get them unless they were inside my accounts? The line went quiet except for his frantic breathing. Then he tried, in the voice of a man rewriting history on the fly. Donna, I need you to understand. The money I took, I was going to pay it back. Rebecca had this investment deal that would double our money in 6 months. We were going to surprise you and Emma. You stole her college fund. I cut in, my tone ice. And you used my name for a loan. It wasn't stealing, it was a loan. His voice cracked on the word. Once Rebecca's father came around, he was going to back me. We would have had more than enough for Emma's college. This was supposed to be for all of us. Emma closed her laptop with a quiet snap, stood and walked to me. Mom, she said, her voice calm but loaded with intent. May I? I handed her the phone without thinking. Hi, Dad. Her voice was perfectly steady. Emma. Oh, thank God. Sweetheart, you have to believe me. I would never steal from you. But you did, she said simply. You took $75,000 from my account, and you used my social security number for a fraudulent mortgage application in Florida. Silence. 10 seconds of it. Who told you that? He asked finally, his voice sharp. No one, she replied. I found out myself. I have copies of every document you and Rebecca signed. I've been watching you for weeks. The sound that came next was part disbelief, part fear. You're 12. You couldn't possibly. I know about the second phone. I know about the fake investment accounts she used to hide the stolen money. And I know Rebecca blocked you yesterday after her father cut her off financially. His breath hitched audibly. How could you? Because I monitor your communications, she said. And because when you left, you taught me that the people who are supposed to protect you sometimes don't. So you protect yourself. Emma, please, whatever you've done, stop. I have nothing left. I'm sleeping in my car. I can't rent an apartment. I can't get a job. Please. Emma's voice didn't waver. You chose her over us. You chose money over your family. And now you live with that choice. Then, with the clean finality of a judge delivering a verdict, she hung up. The silence after was heavy, thick with things I could have said but didn't. Emma set the phone on the table, looked at me and said, He won't call back. How do you know? Because now he knows I'm watching. And he knows I'll see his next move before he makes it. She picked up her laptop and walked toward her room without waiting for my reply. For a long time I just sat there, staring at the phone in my hands. My 12-year-old had just dismantled her father's life. And he deserved every second of it. The next morning, Emma came down for breakfast like any other middle schooler. Hair neatly brushed, uniform crisp, backpack zipped tight. She poured cereal, ate quietly, rinsed her bowl and kissed my cheek before heading to the door. Emma, wait, I said, catching her arm. She turned, brows raised. Yes, Mom. Are you okay? She tilted her head, considering. Of course. Why wouldn't I be? Because of yesterday. Because of what happened with your father. Her face was unreadable. What about it? You had a very intense conversation with him. It's normal to feel upset or confused or... I'm not upset, she cut in, adjusting her backpack straps. I'm relieved. Now he knows what I know, and he knows there are consequences for stealing from his family. The way she said it, calm, factual, no hint of lingering emotion, made my chest tighten. Don't you miss him? Even a little. I miss the dad I thought he was, she said matter-of-factly. But that person wasn't real, was he? He was just a character Dad played when it was convenient. I opened my mouth to respond, but she'd already turned to the door. Mom, I'll miss the bus. When she left, I stood in the silence of our kitchen, staring at the empty doorway. She didn't just seem okay, she seemed finished. Like she had taken the pieces of her father, examined them, and decided they weren't worth keeping. By mid-morning, I was on the phone with our pediatrician's office. Dr. Martinez listened patiently as I explained my concerns, then referred us to a child psychologist, Dr. Patricia Reeves, who specialized in family trauma and gifted children. Gifted children often process difficult situations differently, Dr. Martinez explained. They can intellectualize emotions rather than experience them in the way we expect. It doesn't mean she's not feeling anything, but it may look very different. We got an appointment for the following week. In the meantime, I found myself watching Emma more closely, studying her like a puzzle with pieces I couldn't quite fit together. Her routines never wavered. School, homework, helping with dinner. But there were subtle shifts, like how she'd started keeping a spreadsheet of our expenses, tracking every dollar with the precision of an accountant. Or how she'd begun compiling a file on divorce proceedings and asset recovery, complete with names of local legal aid services. One evening, as I was paying bills at the kitchen table, she slid a printout across to me. Mom, you need to file for divorce immediately, she said. Emma, these are grown-up concerns. You don't need to. Someone has to, she interrupted. Every day you wait gives Dad more time to hide assets or create more debt in your name. You're depressed, which is understandable, but it's not productive. I'm not depressed, so I can think clearly about what needs to happen. Her tone was clinical, almost like she was delivering a diagnosis. And the worst part? She was right. I had been waiting, hoping for a resolution that was never going to come. When the day of the appointment came, I expected her to be nervous. But she walked into Dr. Reeves' softly lit office, decorated in shades of blue and green, with children's artwork on one wall, like she was walking into a meeting she'd prepared for. Emma, Dr. Reeves greeted, smiling warmly. Your mom thought it might be helpful for us to talk about the changes happening in your family. That's fine, Emma said, settling into the chair. I assume this is mandatory after what I did to my father. Dr. Reeves blinked, clearly taken aback. Can you tell me about that? And for the next 45 minutes, Emma did exactly that. She explained how she discovered Mark's affair, documented his financial crimes, and taken steps to prevent further damage. She presented it all without visible emotion, like she was narrating a science project. How did that make you feel? Dr. Reeves asked. Satisfied, Emma said without hesitation. He stole from me, so I made sure there were consequences. It felt like justice. Do you ever feel sad about your father leaving? I feel sad that he became the kind of person who steals from his own child. But I don't feel sad about him facing the results of that choice. When the session ended, Dr. Reeves asked to speak with me privately. Emma waited in the lobby, scrolling through something on her phone with that same air of controlled calm. Mrs. Patterson, Dr. Reeves began, your daughter is remarkable. Her cognitive abilities are exceptional, and her emotional resilience is extraordinary. She's processed this betrayal in a highly functional way. Is it healthy? I asked. Trauma responses vary. Some children crumble under this kind of stress. Others, particularly those with strong analytical skills, respond by taking control. Emma is in the latter group. The question isn't whether she's okay. It's whether you're comfortable with who she's becoming. That night I found her at her desk typing. But instead of surveillance data or hacking tools, her screen displayed a Word document titled Digital Safety for Families. Warning Signs and Protection Strategies. What's this? I asked. I'm writing a guide for other kids whose parents might be stealing from them, she said, scrolling down to show me sections on password security, recognizing forged documents, and protecting personal information. It was sophisticated, clear, incredibly thorough. Mrs. Henderson at school wants me to present it to the PTA next month, she added. 3 other families in our district have had similar problems. She closed the document and looked at me seriously. Mom, are you ashamed of what I did to Dad? The question caught me off guard. Ashamed? No. You saved us, Emma. You protected our family when I couldn't. Then why do you look at me like you're worried? I hesitated, then said, I'm not worried about what you did. I'm worried about what it cost you. What you accomplished was amazing, but it required you to become harder than a child should have to be. She leaned against me just for a moment. I don't feel damaged, Mom. I feel like I finally understand how the world works. And understanding means you can protect yourself from it. As I tucked her in that night, she asked, Do you think Dad ever really loved us? I thought about it. I think he loved the idea of us. But when loving us became inconvenient, he chose himself instead. That's what I thought, she said softly, pulling her stuffed elephant close. And as I turned off her light, I realized maybe Emma wasn't broken. Maybe she was exactly who she needed to be to survive. 6 months later, our lives looked nothing like they had before Mark left. The grief had dulled into something quieter, almost background noise. The apartment we'd moved into was small but warm, a place where every item was ours and ours alone. No ghosts of Mark's suits in the closet, no coffee mugs left behind like tiny landmines. I was shelving books in the children's section of the Millburg Community Library one spring afternoon when my supervisor approached me with a pinched look. Donna, she murmured, glancing toward the front desk. There's a reporter here asking about your daughter. My heart stopped. What kind of reporter? She says she's investigating the Rebecca Sterling embezzlement case. Apparently, someone tipped her off that the anonymous whistleblower might be local. A cold wave ran down my spine. I walked to the front desk and found a woman in a tailored navy suit holding a notepad. She smiled like someone used to getting strangers to talk. Mrs. Patterson, I'm Jennifer Walsh from Channel 7 News. I'm following up on the Sterling fraud scandal. I understand your ex-husband was involved. I can't comment on that, I said quickly. The story's gone national, she pressed. Rebecca Sterling is facing federal charges, and several other victims have come forward. Someone was incredibly thorough in documenting her crimes. We'd love to thank whoever provided the evidence. Her words hung between us like a fishing line I refused to bite. I'm afraid I can't help you, I said, and escorted her to the door. Driving home, my hands gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles ached. Emma was at the kitchen table when I walked in, working through her math homework like any other 13-year-old. There was a reporter at the library today, I said, setting down my bag. She's looking into the Sterling case. Without looking up, Emma said, they'll never connect it to me. I used 7 different proxy servers and paid for all my anonymous accounts with cryptocurrency. I blinked. Emma. It's fine, Mom. She's good. The more attention the case gets, the more victims will come forward. She solved another equation, pencil tapping once against the paper. I've been tracking the news coverage. 12 more families have already contacted authorities. The casual way she said it still startled me. She had triggered a federal investigation, toppled 2 adults' lives, and was now monitoring the ripple effects like she was tracking weather patterns. 3 weeks later, an email popped up on her laptop that changed everything. She called me over to see it. It's from a company called Secure Family, she said, spinning the screen toward me. They somehow figured out my identity. They're offering me a full scholarship to any college I want and a guaranteed job after graduation. Starting salary $120,000 a year. I stared at the letter. Emma, this is incredible. This could set you up for life. She closed the laptop without hesitation. I'm turning it down. What? Why? Because they want to own what I create, she said simply. They want me to build security software that makes money off people's fear instead of actually protecting them. That's not what I'm about. She walked to her backpack and pulled out a sleek, professionally printed business card. E. Patterson, Family Financial Protection Consultant. I already have a job, she said matter-of-factly. I've been helping families secure their finances and recover from fraud for the past month. I have 6 regular clients now, and they pay me $75 an hour for consultations. My jaw dropped. You're 13 years old. How? Age doesn't matter when you work online, she said, pulling up a spreadsheet of her income. She had already made enough to replace most of her college fund. What kind of services do you offer? I help families identify financial red flags, secure their accounts, and file the right reports to recover stolen money. Last week, I helped a family in Ohio get back $30,000 their son had taken from his grandmother's retirement account. Is it legal? Completely. I don't hack for clients, I teach them how to protect themselves. And next month, I'm speaking at a cybersecurity conference. That night, after she went to bed, I found myself scrolling through articles about the Sterling case. Comment threads were filled with stories from people who had experienced similar betrayals. Parents stealing from children, siblings hiding assets, spouses draining accounts. Emma had opened a floodgate, and no one suspected the whistleblower was a 12-year-old girl. 2 months later, while we were washing dishes, she asked me, "Do you think Dad regrets what he did?" I nearly dropped the plate in my hands. Why do you ask? I've been monitoring his social media. He posts about starting over, but he never mentions us. I was wondering if he realizes what he lost. What do you think? I asked carefully. I think regret is just feeling sorry for yourself when you face consequences. It's not the same as understanding why what you did was wrong. And I don't think he's capable of that. She dried her hands, hung up the dish towel, and walked away. For her, the conversation was over, filed away like another case closed. And I knew in that moment my daughter was no longer just surviving what he'd done to us. She was building something from it. Something permanent. Spring arrived with a warmth that felt like renewal. But in our little apartment, the change had been building long before the weather shifted. Emma's consulting business was thriving, clients in multiple states, word-of-mouth referrals, and a steady stream of income that still made my head spin every time I looked at her spreadsheets. But what struck me most wasn't the money. It was the mission she'd shaped for herself. One evening, I found her hunched over her laptop at the kitchen table, headphones around her neck, speaking softly into the microphone. I paused in the hallway listening. "I know it's scary discovering your mother has been using your college fund," she was saying gently. "But you're going to be okay. I'm going to help you protect what's left, and make sure this doesn't happen again." It took me a moment to realize she was talking to another teenager. A stranger, probably halfway across the country, whose life was being dismantled in the same way ours had been. "The most important thing to remember," she continued, is that this isn't your fault. Adults are supposed to protect you, not steal from you. When they don't, you have to protect yourself. I stepped away from the door, my eyes stinging. That was the heart of who she had become. Not just someone who had fought for us, but someone who was now fighting for others. At breakfast the next morning, she sat across from me with her hair still damp from the shower, scrolling through her phone as she ate. I want to turn this into a non-profit when I turn 18, she said casually, like she was talking about joining a club at school. A non-profit? I asked. Yeah, something that offers free protection services to families who can't afford private consultants. What happened to us isn't rare, Mom. It's just invisible. People don't talk about it. Her voice was steady, but I caught the undercurrent of something harder. She wasn't letting this go, not because she couldn't, but because she refused to. One Saturday afternoon, I was curled up on the couch reading when I heard her voice again. This time through a video call in her room. Okay, she said. Here's how we start. You'll need to pull your credit report. Look for accounts you don't recognize. Then we'll freeze your credit so she can't open anything new in your name. After that, we'll contact the bank fraud department. I'll walk you through each step. The way she spoke, calm, methodical, without an ounce of hesitation, made her sound far older than 13. It also made me realize she was doing something that, at her age, I couldn't have imagined. Becoming a lifeline for kids trapped in the same betrayal she'd lived through. That night, as we washed dishes together, I said, "You're really making a difference, you know?" She shrugged, drying a plate. If I can help other families avoid what we went through, then maybe something good came out of Dad's choices. I wanted to tell her she'd done more than help, that she'd turned survival into a kind of armor she could lend to others. But before I could find the words, she glanced at me and asked, "Do you think Dad ever really loved us?" The question landed like a stone in my chest. I think he loved the idea of us, I said honestly. But when loving us became inconvenient, he chose himself. She nodded once, as if confirming something she already knew. That's what I thought too. Later that week, I caught her on a call with a middle-aged woman who sounded shaken. Emma was walking her through setting up two-factor authentication and teaching her how to spot phishing scams. Now, Emma said firmly, you're going to make your passwords so strong they'd take 1,000 years to crack. We're not just locking the door, we're building a fortress. When the call ended, she closed her laptop and stretched, looking pleased but not boastful. That was Mrs. Ortiz from Nevada, she said. Her ex-husband tried to take out a loan in her son's name. Not anymore. It was in that moment I realized Emma wasn't just reacting to what had happened to us anymore. She was leading the charge. She was turning her pain into purpose, her fear into a blueprint for protection. And somewhere deep down, I knew she'd never let her guard down again. Not for anyone. Not even for me. By early summer, Emma's side project had evolved into something that looked suspiciously like a full-fledged enterprise. She still did her schoolwork. Her grades hadn't slipped an inch, but between classes, lunch breaks, and evenings she was on calls, answering encrypted emails, and drafting guides with titles like How to Spot a Financial Betrayal Before It Happens and 10 Digital Locks Every Family Should Have. It amazed me how she moved between worlds so seamlessly. At school, she was just another 8th grader, eating cafeteria pizza and rolling her eyes at group projects. At home, she was a strategist, a consultant, and, though she'd never say it out loud, a vigilante. One Tuesday, I came home from work to find her at the dining table with her laptop open, 3 browser windows split across the screen. "What's going on?" I asked, dropping my bag on the chair. She didn't look up. "Helping a family in Ohio." The dad emptied his son's trust fund and tried to funnel it through a fake business account. "I've already flagged the bank and filed a report with the state attorney general." I sat down slowly. "Emma, what you're doing, it's important. But it's also a lot. Are you sure you can handle all this?" Her fingers didn't stop moving. "Mom, I handled him. Everything after that feels easy." She meant Mark. She didn't have to say his name. Later that night, she slid an envelope across the table to me. "I need you to sign this," she said. "What is it?" "Nonprofit registration paperwork. I'm starting the process now so everything's ready when I'm old enough to legally own it. In the meantime, you'll be listed as the founder." I stared at her. "You're 13. You can't even drive a car." She smirked faintly. "I can drive a firewall." It was such an Emma thing to say, equal parts sharp and impossible to argue with, that I signed. 2 weeks later, she was invited to speak virtually at a cybersecurity conference in Chicago. The organizers thought she was an adult specialist named E. Patterson. She presented via encrypted video feed. Her voice modulated just enough to sound older. I listened from the kitchen as she told an audience of professionals how to detect subtle signs of digital fraud, complete with case studies drawn from anonymous clients I suspected were anything but. She held her own against follow-up questions from people with 20 years more experience. Afterward, she closed her laptop and turned to me with a rare, genuine smile. "They think I'm 35 and live in Seattle," she said. I laughed, but there was a flicker of something under the humor. A sharp awareness that she was walking a line between exposure and anonymity. That line got thinner one Friday afternoon. I was making tea when Emma came into the kitchen, phone in hand. "You're not going to like this," she said. She turned the screen toward me. A new email sat in her inbox from an unrecognizable address. The subject line read, "I know who you are." The message was short. "You think you're untouchable. You're not. Stop what you're doing, or I'll make sure everyone knows exactly who's been behind these anonymous reports." A cold knot tightened in my stomach. "Emma, it's from one of Rebecca's old associates," she said calmly. "The writing style matches some of her past email drafts. I've been monitoring her network. This isn't a joke. They're threatening you." She closed the message and started typing. "Then they're about to regret it." The confidence in her tone frightened me almost as much as the threat itself. "Emma, maybe you should." "Mom," she said, meeting my eyes, "you didn't see what they've done to other families." "I'm not stopping." I didn't know whether to be proud, terrified, or both. But I did know one thing: whatever she planned next, it wasn't going to be small. And something in my gut told me that by the time it was over, the people who thought they could scare her would wish they'd never sent that email. That night I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that email in blocky black text. The words "I know who you are" hovering in my mind like a storm cloud. I kept replaying the possibilities: Rebecca herself, one of her clients, some shadowy partner in crime. Whoever it was, they weren't bluffing. At 2:14 a.m. I heard it again. The steady rhythm of Emma's typing from her room. Not the casual, uneven taps of schoolwork. This was fast, purposeful, and relentless, like the beat of a war drum. I knocked softly, but she called, "Come in," without pausing her keystrokes. Her screen was a battlefield. Half a dozen windows open, lines of code running in one, a network map pulsing in another, a document filling with what looked like correspondence logs. "What are you doing?" I asked quietly. "Finding them," she said, eyes locked on the screen. "They made a mistake." "What mistake?" "They sent the email from a spoofed address, but they routed it through a public Wi-Fi network at a coffee shop in Miami. Those places use basic routers. I already have the logs." She clicked through to a folder marked Threat Investigation. My breath caught as she opened a subfolder filled with screenshots of security footage from the coffee shop, pulled from their poorly secured cameras. One grainy still frame showed a man in his late 30s at a corner table, hunched over a laptop. He wasn't looking at the camera, but the timestamp matched the exact minute the email was sent. "His name's David Krause," Emma said, pulling up another file without waiting for me to ask. "He worked under Rebecca at the firm. He handled high-risk accounts for wealthy clients who didn't like answering questions about where their money came from." I stared at her. "Emma, this is illegal," she finished for me. "No, I haven't accessed anything private yet. I'm just gathering publicly available data they didn't bother to secure." She opened another file, David's LinkedIn profile, Facebook posts, property records. "He's desperate. He's 2 months behind on his condo payments and his car lease. If he's trying to scare me, it's because he thinks I'm the reason he's broke." "Are you?" I asked before I could stop myself. Her mouth twitched in something that might have been amusement. "Indirectly. When I took Rebecca down, her whole inner circle collapsed. People like David lost their access to stolen money." "Emma, maybe it's time to let this go. You've done more than enough." "No," she said sharply. "If I stop, they'll just move on to someone else. They'll target another family, another kid, someone who can't fight back." I wanted to argue, but the conviction in her voice left no room. She wasn't just reacting to what had happened to us anymore. She was running a full-scale defense campaign for people she'd never met. 2 days later, David Krause emailed again. This time it wasn't a threat. We need to talk. Face to face. If you don't, I'll go public with everything. Emma forwarded it to a secure account she used for evidence storage, then looked at me. He's bluffing. How can you be sure? She slid her laptop toward me. Because while he was writing that email, I was in his system. I have all his files, fake invoices, offshore transfers, shell company registrations. If he tries to out me, I'll bury him with his own crimes. The ease with which she said it chilled me. Not because she was wrong, she wasn't, but because there was no hesitation. No flicker of doubt. What are you going to do? I asked. She leaned back, fingers steepled like someone twice her age. Nothing yet. Let him sweat. People make bigger mistakes when they think they're holding the cards. And for the first time since that email arrived, I realized something. Emma wasn't just protecting herself anymore. She was hunting. By the end of that week, David Krause was unraveling. Emma could see it, and so could I. She monitored him like a hawk through the open channels he didn't even know he'd left exposed. His search history alone read like a confession. How to erase hard drives securely. Can deleted files be recovered? Criminal Statute of Limitations, Embezzlement, Florida. Panic, Emma said one night, tilting her screen toward me so I could see the trail of frantic activity. He's in pure panic mode. That's when people start making irreversible mistakes. It wasn't just online. He'd started posting vague, defensive rants on social media, cryptic lines about false accusations, and betrayals by people you thought were friends. Emma saved every single one, adding them to her growing folder of evidence. Why are you keeping all of this? I asked. Because patterns matter, she said simply. When he finally does something stupid enough to tip the scales, I'll have the full timeline. People like David can't help but tell on themselves if you watch closely enough. Her confidence scared me. Not because she was reckless, Emma was the opposite of reckless, but because she had learned to operate in a world where the rules for ordinary people didn't apply. On Monday morning, she came to me holding a USB drive. I'm going to give him an exit, she said. An exit? Yeah. I'm going to send him an anonymous message with a choice. Walk away quietly and never contact me again. Or I'll forward his entire history to the Federal Fraud Task Force. The message she drafted was short and lethal. You've been sloppy. I have everything: files, transfers, invoices. Walk away, or the next people who see them will be wearing badges. You're 13, I reminded her, my voice tight. And you're sending a man with a criminal history a blackmail note. She shook her head. It's not blackmail if I'm not asking for anything. I'm giving him a chance to disappear before the law gets him. That afternoon she sent it through an encrypted, untraceable channel. Within hours she had her answer. Not in words but in silence. His social media accounts vanished. His LinkedIn was scrubbed. The bank accounts she'd been monitoring went dormant. He's gone, she said that night, spooning ice cream into a bowl like she hadn't just driven a grown man into hiding. Just like that? I asked. Emma nodded. He knows I'm watching. And he knows I have the reach to make good on my word. That's enough. But the next day proved she was wrong about one thing. David hadn't gone entirely quiet. He'd gone sideways. While I was at work, Emma messaged me. Check your email when you get home. When I walked in that evening, she was already at the table with her laptop open. He sent you something, she said, sliding the screen toward me. It was a single video file, timestamped from 2 years ago. The image was grainy but clear enough to see me at a charity gala with Mark, smiling at something just out of frame. Overlaid text read. Not so innocent after all. My throat went dry. What is this supposed to mean? Emma hit play. The video cut abruptly to a clip of Mark signing papers at what looked like the same gala. Then to Rebecca laughing with a man I didn't know. Then back to me, except the angle made it look like I was whispering into that man's ear. It's fake, Emma said flatly. Deepfake level edits. Low quality but believable enough if someone wants to smear you. Why would he? To rattle you, she interrupted. To make you back off. I stared at the frozen frame of my own face, my image twisted into something unrecognizable. Emma, this is dangerous territory. If he's willing to fabricate this. He just gave me exactly what I needed, she said, her eyes narrowing. Proof he's willing to manipulate evidence. That's gold in a legal setting. I leaned back, my pulse hammering. What are you going to do? She smiled, a slow, deliberate thing I'd seen only a few times before. Oh, I'm not going to do anything yet. I'm going to let him think this worked. The more confident he feels, the more mistakes he'll make. And then. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Because I already knew, when Emma finally decided to make her move, David Krause wouldn't just disappear. He'd collapse. By the end of that week, Emma had turned David's sloppy smear attempt into ammunition. She'd cataloged every frame of the fake video, noting the inconsistencies, lighting shifts that didn't match the room, my dress edges blurring in ways no real fabric would. A shadow on Mark's face that moved in the wrong direction. The kind of details that screamed forgery to anyone who knew how to look. Why not just expose it now? I asked one night as she hunched over her laptop, the glow catching the angles of her face and making her look older than she was. Because, she said without looking up, he doesn't know I've caught the flaws. The moment I go public, he goes into hiding for real. But if I let him think I'm rattled, he'll push harder. And every push leaves more fingerprints. She wasn't wrong. Over the next few days, the harassment escalated. Anonymous emails with subject lines like "you should be ashamed" or "your friends will know soon." A series of block number calls that hung up the second I answered. Emma treated each one like a breadcrumb, collecting metadata, tracking IP origins, and building what she called a perimeter map of his digital activity. By Wednesday, she had enough. Tonight, she told me after dinner, we take him off the board. I stared at her. Emma, he's dangerous. Her eyes were steady. Not as dangerous as I am when I'm prepared. That night, I sat across from her as she executed her plan. First, she uploaded the forged video to a forensic analysis platform used by journalists and legal teams, embedding a full report on its fabrication. Then she bundled that with every incriminating file she had on David, embezzlement records, offshore transfers, false invoices, and sent the entire package to 3 places at once. The Federal Fraud Task Force, Rebecca's ongoing case investigators, and an investigative journalist Emma had vetted months earlier. Why the journalist? I asked. Because the legal system moves slow, she said, clicking to encrypt the last transfer. But public shame? That's instant. By morning, David's name was trending locally on social media. The journalist had published a piece linking him to Rebecca's old network, highlighting both his financial crimes and his recent smear attempt against a protected witness in an ongoing case. He's going to know that was you, I said when I saw the article. He already knows, she replied, pouring herself cereal like we were discussing the weather. But now, so does everyone else. At 9:17 a.m. David called. From a number Emma had already tagged in her files. She put it on speaker. You think you've won? His voice was hoarse, shaking with barely controlled rage. No, Emma said evenly. I know I have. You came after my family. That was your first mistake. Thinking I wouldn't see every move you made? That was your second. And your third mistake is assuming you have anything left to fight with. You're just he started, then cut himself off, maybe realizing mid-sentence that admitting he knew her age would expose how badly he'd underestimated her. You're finished, she said simply and hung up. By the end of the week, David Krause had deactivated every account, sold his condo, and vanished from Florida entirely. The federal task force had announced new charges in Rebecca's case, naming an associate as a cooperating witness. I didn't have to ask who had handed them their roadmap. Emma just closed her laptop one evening, leaned back in her chair and said, "One less snake in the grass." I wanted to tell her I was proud. I also wanted to tell her I was scared, because with each win, she seemed to step further into a world where winning meant dismantling someone's life piece by piece. And she was getting very, very good at it. 2 weeks after David Krause vanished, the ripple effect began. It started small, an email from a woman in Arizona who'd read the article about his collapse. She wrote that her ex-husband had drained their joint accounts and hidden the money in a maze of fake businesses. She didn't know who else to turn to, but she'd heard, there was someone out there who helps people like me. Emma read it, then looked at me over the top of her laptop. She's not wrong, she said. The Arizona case was followed by another from Pennsylvania, then 2 more from Texas, then a steady trickle from all over the country. These weren't teenagers like the ones she'd quietly coached before. These were adults, some twice my age, desperate for guidance. Why are they coming to you instead of the police? I asked one evening as she organized her case queue into a spreadsheet that looked suspiciously like the systems used by professional investigators. Because the police can't undo the damage. They can only punish it after the fact. I stop it while it's still happening, she said simply. Her consultations stretched later into the night, and her network of encrypted contacts grew. More than once, I passed her room at 1 a.m. to hear her calmly walking someone through securing a compromised account or filing a fraud alert before dawn. One Friday afternoon, she came home from school with a sealed envelope in her backpack. This came to the office at school, she said, handing it to me. Inside was a single sheet of stationery from Secure Families Alliance, a nonprofit I'd never heard of. The letter was an invitation, no, a request, for her to speak anonymously at a closed session panel on youth-led cybersecurity initiatives. The event would be attended by law enforcement representatives, financial regulators, and select media. You told me you were turning down offers, I said cautiously. This one's different. They don't want to own my work, they want to learn from it, she said. And I think it's time to go bigger. The night before the panel, she sat at her desk rehearsing her talking points. I listened from the doorway as she outlined her philosophy. Prevention before prosecution. Empowering victims to take back control. The element of surprise against perpetrators. You're not going to give away anything that could identify you, right? I asked. She glanced over her shoulder with a faint smile. Mom, I'm not careless. You raised me better than that. The panel itself was closed to the public, so she appeared via a voice-only link, introducing herself only as E. I sat beside her in our apartment as she spoke to a virtual room full of professionals, her voice steady, her words sharper than most of the adults in attendance. One law enforcement official asked, "How do you build trust with victims so quickly?" "By telling them the truth," she said without hesitation. That the betrayal isn't their fault, and that they have more power than they've been led to believe. Most perpetrators rely on silence and shame. Break that, and you've already won half the battle. When the session ended, she closed her laptop and exhaled. That's going to open doors, she said, almost to herself. I didn't have to wait long to see what she meant. Within a week, a financial crimes unit from another state had reached out, not to hire her, but to consult her on a multi-victim embezzlement case. They didn't know she was 13. The cases kept coming, and with them, a quiet transformation in her approach. She no longer reacted to threats, she anticipated them. She built a checklist for every client, a layered defense system, and even a small team of vetted adult volunteers who acted as her front face when legal paperwork was needed. But with the growth came something else, a shadow I couldn't ignore. She was working with people who were angrier, more desperate, and in some cases more dangerous than David or Rebecca had ever been. And no matter how many security layers she built, I knew there were ways for danger to slip through. One evening as she packed up her laptop, I asked, "Emma, how far are you willing to take this?" She looked at me for a long moment before answering. "As far as I have to." It wasn't bravado. It was a statement of fact. And I realized then that the girl who once said "don't worry, I handled it" was now building a war chest of tools, allies, and strategies for battles I couldn't yet see. And something told me, those battles were already on the horizon. It began with a package. Not the kind Emma usually received. No padded envelopes of documents from clients. No flash drives disguised as novelty keychains. This one was a plain cardboard box, taped sloppily with no return address. It had been dropped off by a local courier service, not the postal system. She carried it in with a look that was half curiosity, half suspicion. "We don't open this inside," she said immediately. "We set it on the balcony table." She slit the tape with a box cutter, lifting the flaps like she was disarming something dangerous. Inside was a single object. A child's stuffed rabbit, well-worn, one ear hanging by a thread. No note, no explanation. But I saw her face change, the blood draining out, her jaw tightening. "It's hers," she whispered. "Whose?" I asked. "Clara's. My first case. The girl whose stepfather was stealing her college fund. The rabbit had been a kind of talisman for Clara during those long encrypted chats, back before Emma even called what she did work. Clara had said she kept it by her bed so she wouldn't feel alone. When Emma returned the stolen money to her family, she thought the chapter was closed. But the rabbit showing up here meant someone knew exactly who she was. That night, Emma tore apart her own systems, hunting for the breach. It's not my firewall, not my proxies. This is someone who's been inside the house, she muttered. A week later, the next move came, this time, a direct message to her encrypted account. No screen name, no profile picture. Just a single line. You stopped one job. I have 3 more. Stay out of my way. Emma stared at the message, then typed back. Or what? The reply was almost instant. Or Clara's not the only one who loses everything. That was the first time I saw her hesitate. Not out of fear for herself, Emma never calculated risk that way, but because she understood exactly what the sender meant. This wasn't just about money anymore. The next day, she told me she was taking a break from new cases. I didn't believe her, and I was right. What she actually did was more dangerous. She went on offense. She tracked the message through layers of obfuscation, narrowing it down to a signal bouncing from a derelict warehouse 2 counties over. It's a relay point, she explained, but whoever's running it is sloppy. If I can catch them logging in, I can unmask them. I wanted to tell her to stop, that she was 13, that she was out of her depth. But I'd already learned. Emma only stopped when she was satisfied. 3 nights later, she got her break. They're online, she whispered at 2:17 a.m., fingers flying over her keyboard. Her screen filled with scrolling code, then froze on a name I recognized, David Krause. But it wasn't just David. There was another account tied to the relay, one that made her sit back in her chair, her face pale. It was someone from inside one of her more recent victories. Someone she had trusted to carry out the fixes she designed. Mom, she said quietly, this isn't about revenge anymore. This is about a network. She leaned forward, the glow of the monitor painting her face in stark light. And I think I just found the doorway in. Once she had the names, she began building a map, thread by thread, of the network's connections. It wasn't like the usual crime syndicates she dismantled before. This was more like a shadowed cooperative, a coalition of small-time fraudsters, identity thieves, and digital extortionists who occasionally pooled resources for bigger jobs. But the most alarming part? The same people she had once helped, the ones she had pulled out of trouble, were now either working for this network or feeding it information. It's like a parasite, Emma muttered, scrolling through her web of connections. You think you've removed it, but it's just moved to another host. One particular thread kept catching her eye. A sequence of accounts all tied to the sale of clean identities. Entire digital footprints. Fabricated, spotless, ready to be slipped over a real person's life like a mask. That's what the rabbit was, she said suddenly. A warning. They're telling me they can erase someone. Erase. Not just bankrupt, not just destroy online reputations. Erase. Wipe them from government records, health systems, school databases. Leave them stranded in their own life as a ghost. She leaned back thinking, if they can do that, I can undo it. But to do that, I have to go in. Going in meant infiltrating the network as a potential buyer. She created an alias. A mid-level corporate fraudster looking for identities to run a long-term scam. She loaded her digital wallet with untraceable crypto, set up a backstory that could survive a dozen layers of scrutiny, and waited for a bite. It came within 12 hours. A handler calling himself Null Gate messaged her directly. Saw your post. Got product you'll like. But you don't get to talk to me unless you prove you're serious. Emma sent a tiny transaction, enough to mark her as credible, not enough to sting if she lost it. Meet in Redline tomorrow 0200 UTC. Bring your PGP. She logged off, exhaled slowly, and turned to me. This is it. If I can get inside their exchange, I can see who's feeding them data. But it's a trap, I said. Her eyes flashed, not with recklessness but with cold certainty. Of course it is. That's why I'm walking in first. The following night, Redline, a private hidden forum, opened a thread for her. A black background, red text, a single blinking cursor. Nullgate posted a file. Download this. Your door into the market. Emma didn't touch it directly. She spun up an isolated sandbox system, funneled the file through 3 scanners, stripped it of its tracker code, then opened it. What she found wasn't just a catalog of stolen identities, it was a live dashboard, showing in real time which profiles were being bought and sold. And there in the upper right corner under pending transfers, was a name that made her blood run cold. Clara. The same Clara from her first case. The girl with the rabbit. The network wasn't just threatening Emma. They were actively in the process of erasing the person she had once sworn to protect. Emma's fingers hovered over the keyboard. They think I'm here to buy. They have no idea I'm about to burn their entire market to the ground. Emma had one rule for digital war. If you can't cut the head off cleanly, burn the whole nest. She didn't waste time with polite infiltration anymore. The moment she saw Clara's name in the pending transfers list, she shifted from undercover buyer to full-scale attacker. Her sandbox system wasn't just a safe space, it was a launchpad. With 3 simultaneous scripts running, she began flooding Nullgate's market with corrupted identity files, perfectly formatted but laced with hidden payloads. Each one looked valuable, tempting enough for their automated systems to accept instantly. Once inside, those payloads began overwriting database entries with garbage strings, swapping out passport numbers for song lyrics, replacing biometric hashes with random weather data. Within minutes, the clean, structured catalog turned into chaos. Nullgate came online. And what the hell is this? Emma. A lesson in picking your prey. He didn't log off, which meant he was scrambling to isolate her attack. But Emma wasn't giving him that chance. She'd already traced the data handoffs to 3 main servers, and 2 of them were wide open through outdated admin panels. One by one, she severed their links. And then came the second wave, her message. Every profile in the market suddenly bore the same attached image. A white rabbit on a field of black, its red eyes glowing. Beneath it, a single line of text. The rabbit runs for those who can't. She knew Nullgate would understand exactly who sent it. But the most important thing wasn't the warning. It was the reversal. She'd already begun reconstructing Clara's digital identity from cached fragments buried in backup nodes. It was like stitching together a person from ashes, but Emma was fast and she was furious. By the time Nullgate realized she was taking people out of his system, not putting them in, it was too late. Clara's record was whole again, driver's license, school records, bank accounts, all re-anchored to her real-world ID. Emma sent the final transmission. Emma, you erase people. I rebuild them. We are not the same. The dashboard blinked once, twice. Then the entire market went dark. When she finally leaned back from the keyboard, I could see the cost in her face, pale, drawn, but alive with a kind of grim satisfaction. They'll be back, I said quietly. Of course, she replied. Parasites always come back. But so will I. She stood, grabbed her coat, and headed for the door. Where are you going? I asked. To see Clara, she said. And to make sure the rabbit keeps running.